All right, so part 2 of the message, the Red Horse Concern. So as we look at Nebuchadnezzar as it relates to the book of Daniel, and we track him through chapters 1 and 2, we will find out that Nebuchadnezzar, he had a dream. And with this dream, and I'm not going to get into all of this because I don't have time. So for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to, I'm gonna go. He had this dream, this statue, and the statue was symbolic of him because he erected a statue. So he has this dream, and he needs somebody to interpret this dream. And this is where Daniel comes in at. And this is going to be a part of my message when we get to the black horse, because God is going to speak through us through the life of Daniel as it relates to a Christian life of excellence. See, there's more that God is requiring out of us. And Daniel had what the king was looking for. Daniel had what the king is looking for. I'm trying to stay track, but I am already going through all these different doors that are opening up, and I hear stuff happening in my head like crazy. So as we look at this image, this statue, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is very descriptive. And so he tells this dream. Daniel, long story short, Daniel's there to interpret it. I want to take out everything from the head all the way down to the legs. And I just want to focus on the feet for the sake of our teaching on this Sunday morning. So when he gets down to the feet, he says that the feet were made out of clay and out of iron. The feet were made out of clay and iron. Now, for all of you metallurgists, you chemists that are out there, you know, from a scientific standpoint, that you can't blend, you can't merge clay and iron and expect it to have longevity, to expect it to be sure, to expect it to be solid. The feet is symbolic of something that causes the body to stand. It carries the body from one place to the next place. The body relies upon the feet. If I want to get from here to over there, I need my feet in order to do that. But if my feet fail me, if my feet crumbles, then that means that my body is not going to be able to do what I want it to do. And as we navigate, I'm getting ahead of myself. As we navigate, we are going to discover something, because it was not by, it just didn't happen that the feet was clay and iron. It was by design that the feet was clay and iron, because what God was ultimately going to show Nebuchadnezzar was that I am going to bring you down. And a clue that I'm going to bring you down is that your feet are not sure-footed. Your feet are not sure-footed. Your feet is on sinking sand. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to blend evil with good. What you're trying to do is you're trying to, it's a dichotomy. It's a dichotomy. And you want to blend a Christianity with, or Christ with the Antichrist. So these are some of the things. Now I'm giving you a little clue here. Okay, so when we look at that, we say, okay, Daniel gives the interpretation to Nebuchadnezzar. He gives some warnings and so on and so forth. Nebuchadnezzar does not heed to the warning and all that. So I'll get to all that at another point, because Nebuchadnezzar is very critical to understanding end time, and Daniel is very critical to understanding end time. And we certainly will unpack that so we can have better clarity and understanding on where we need to go. So why do I want to talk about this red horse today? I want to talk about this red horse because this red horse is very significant to the feet of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I know some of y'all scholars out there, y'all gonna say, well, this prophecy was fulfilled in, back in Daniel's day in 550 or 555. I get all that, but not all of it. See, because revelation is revelation. Revelation is something that you can't put a time limit on, and you can't exhaust it. So as I said, I wasn't the expert, but what I will say to you is when we look at Daniel 2 and 30 or 31, and we look at the latter part B of it, I'm going to say maybe part A was fulfilled back then, but part B, which talks about the feet of this statue, no, that is very alive and indicative of what's going on today. All right. So how does that work with where we are as it relates to this red horse? And I told you guys before that the red horse represents judgment, and it also represents death. So I liken the red horse to communism. And I'm going to say that communism is the mother to socialism, ecumenism, interfaithism. It is the mother to that. Actually, not so much interfaithism, because no, it's not interfaithism, because that's going to go more over to another part of the redness that I'm going to cover here in a second. So, but from a political and a governmental standpoint, that's the purpose of the red horse. The Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, is represented by a solid red flag with a symbol at one corner of it, but it's also communistic. Okay, so is North Korea and so is China. They are represented of red flags as well. Now, these flags are symbols, and these are forthtelling, and it's going to, it tells us a lot, or it clues us into a lot of the revelation of what's getting ready to happen now. When God told Daniel to close the book in Daniel 12:4, when he says close the book because and that but knowledge will be increased, he says, but I can't tell you what this means now, because this is not for you, but knowledge will increase. Back then, they didn't have computers. They didn't have all the stuff, the technology and stuff that we have today. And so God wasn't giving it to him. Not only that, the nations that we know today were not the nations that they knew back then, nor were they symbolic of those nations in terms of colors, in terms of symbols, and like it says, the beast and the fowl and the wings, eagle's wings and all that stuff. They didn't have all that back then, but now we have it and we understand what it is. So this red piece that goes along with this horse is a blending of. It's a blending of. That's the government side or the political side. When we look at it from a religious side, I'm not going to say spiritual, but from a religious side, we have to look at the Pope or the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, the strength of the Catholic Church is in the cardinals. And the cardinals are the closest thing to the Pope. They are advisors to the Pope. Now, y'all can go back, because I don't have time to get into all this stuff, but you got the internet, knowledge, technologies out there. You can go and you can see some of the influence and the recommendations and the things that the Pope is starting to welcome into the religion. Catholicism. It basically, what the Pope is saying is that let's allow the Muslim faith to be housed with Catholicism, or to be housed with the Protestant faith, all that. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I will be able to show you that. But for the sake of my message, I'm going to keep traveling here. So we look at that, but it is a blending. It is a blending. That blending is a picture of the feet of Nebuchadnezzar. Or not Nebuchadnezzar, but the feet. Actually, it did end up being Nebuchadnezzar, because God brought him down. The statue, which was indicative of him showed him that he was going to crumble. And so you're going to lose your footing. So anyway, it was the clay and the iron. They come together and they mix. All right. So the mixture of iron and clay could be that of interfaithism. Interfaithism is no more, no less than a mixture of different types of beliefs coming together. Whenever you say that the only way to get to the Father is through his son Jesus, so everybody that's going to be saved, you got to come through Jesus. But when you start saying that there's many ways to get to God and we can bypass Jesus, then we get into what is called interfaithism, or we get into ecumenism, or we get into socialism. Okay, and this is a bifurcation. It is the mixing of more than one thing. It's two things coming together, and you trying to get something sustainable out of it. And as it relates to this, what we're talking about, it's not going to work. God is not going to allow this, that, and the other to come in. See, because this, that, and the other didn't die on the cross. This, that, and the other, blood wasn't shed. This, that, and the other didn't take the stripes that you are to be healed for. This, that, and the other didn't get up on the third day. Not this, that, and the other. So when you start talking about Buddhism, Hinduism, and all these other things, Muslim, Islamic faith and all that, when you start talking about the mingling of all that with Christianity, you think we got a problem. We're going to have a problem with this right here. God is not going to buy into that. But it speaks to Daniel 2:31. Okay, there's these clay feet. So we can, and I hope it's starting to come, because where I'm trying to get you to is to understand the setup and the agenda by the Antichrist. And I'm not going to be able to cover everything today, but I will come back and we're going to continue to unpack it, because you have to understand this is part of it. So, but I got to break it down in little segments so that, you'll get it and it'll start to resonate and it'll start to click. So we're looking at all these things that are going on. We're looking at the Biden and the Harris, which speaks to the United States democracy being blended with China, which is communistic. You can check it all out, but Biden wants to go kind of deep into China, into some things. And so there's some relationships that wants to be re-stimulated, to resurface. And some, let's shake hands, and the stuff that was in the past was in the past. I'm here now, so we want to resurface, and let's do business. Okay, and doing business is one thing, but when you do business and it's going against the grain of God, then that becomes a troubling issue. And sometimes we can put our hands in things and touch things that we don't know what we're getting ready to touch. Okay, so that's on the political and government side. The last thing I'll say as it relates to the religious side, as it relates to the Pope, and the Pope bringing all these different religions together, is that this interfaithism, or this religious momentum, it also peels off into these other communities now that we are embracing: the LGBTQ community, same-sex marriage, male with male, female with female, all that type of stuff. Because remember, religion sets the foundation and the precedence for how we, from an anthropology standpoint, it sets the precedence of how we see one another. So if you start to see the intermingling of religions, and certain religions that are acceptance for, these types of lifestyles, then now we have other issues. So religion and politics or government is very strong, and it represents the red horse. Okay. Number two, and I gotta move quickly here. Number two, the other thing that I want to say about the Pope and the Antichrist with the false prophet is that when we look at when God was talking to Jeremiah, and he says, if the countryman or if the footman bother you right now, these social issues, these issues on the home front, these issues on your job, these issues in your community, as it relates to racism, as it relates to Black Lives Matter and all that. And please do not get me wrong on this, because I believe with every fiber in me that Black Lives Matter, but not from the premise of this socialism movement that it emerged from. It was born out of that. But do Black Lives matter? They most certainly do matter. In that when we look at some of these cultural issues, we have to acknowledge that. Because what the evangelicals are not saying, and they fail to do this, is that from a theological standpoint, and when we start talking about theology, we talking about developmental theology, which y'all didn't do when y'all was saying vote Trump, vote Trump, vote Trump, and maybe God was going to use Trump, and maybe God still will use Trump, but you just can't say vote Trump without putting structure and hermeneutic with it. You have to give me some understanding. Okay, you just don't say vote Trump, because many of you all that were the evangelicals out there, and you had this rich following of people, and you were saying do this and do that. You were saying it for the right reasons, because God, he he may have wanted Trump in there because Trump was one that came up against socialism. He came up against ecumenism. He came up against communism. He came up against the things that the Pope wants to do from a religious standpoint and be receptive of all these religions, which is pointing towards the Antichrist. Yes, all that. But when you had an opportunity to come and give us some reasoning with it, you didn't do that. All you did was got up there and you said, the Lord says. Once again, you spiritualize it. It's faith. It's like having a system. And this is where a lot of us have went to. When we look at Christianity, we started off in, Hebrews, the 10th chapter. In Hebrews 10, we have a strong foundation for coming to Christ, for the faith in Jesus Christ. And we look at the suffering and the price that was paid and all that. But then when you get to 11, the preachers went from there as the substratum to what this is all about to once they got to Hebrews 11, it starts off with now faith. And so they turned now into whatever they wanted it to be in. So then we start getting the prosperity preachers out of it. And so now faith is instead of the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, it becomes now faith is the Bentley, the Mercedes, the this and the that. And you forgot about the communities that you lived in. You forgot about the members that was in the church that was giving you, I want the $30 line and the $100 line and the $500 line and all that. You didn't stay close enough to the $5 line, the dollar line, and what they was going through and where they were at. And okay, if they're giving this, which ultimately helps you, the preacher, but we didn't have a plan to help them. And so we get this this other faith where we get, they used to call them the faith pimps and all that kind of stuff. I digress. But my point is this, is that if you wanted to get us to understand, you needed to put some other type of verbiage, some type of structure, some theology, some hermeneutic with it to bring about an understanding of why God wanted Trump to be in office with the behavior that he was having. Okay, if you said it, you didn't say it loud enough, you didn't make it pronounced enough so that we could take the ball and run with it. Had you done that, it may have been a different outcome, but it may have been a different understanding. So don't worry about it. I'm here now. And so I'm talking about the horses are coming. And I want to make that relevant. I'm going to put a hermeneutic. I'm going to make it theologically sound and plain, so you understand. If I start talking about Trump and I'm saying that Trump would have been better for us as from a United States standpoint had he been in, because when you start to recognize what is coming. And that's what God said to Jeremiah. If these things are bothering you, and they are very relevant issues when you start dealing with all that, because that's the day-to-day and that is the cultural issues. But he's saying that is significant, but it's not as significant as what's to come. Now what's to come, you got to deal with was not as significant, but what is more significant. So now when you were majoring in the minors, although the minors are not insignificant, now you're going to have, instead of, okay, so in other words, what we're doing is we are majoring in minors when we deal with the culture instead of minoring, and we're minoring in the majors. And the majors is what's to come. So God is saying, take your focus away from the culture, because that's the cultural things, emotional things, because that is the minor now. And I want you to look at the major things, and that's what's to come. And that's where this red horse comes in at, the Antichrist and the false prophet. So when we get to Revelations 19 and 20, which talks about the Antichrist and the false prophet, and I'm going to bring the Pope in with that. But by definition, the point that I was trying to make a few minutes ago, and then I got off on this other stuff, is that by definition, when you look at that from a Hebrew definition, in Strong's, and I forget exactly where it's at, but I can reference it in the caption or whatever, and I can show it to you. When God says to him, what are you going to do when the horsemen come? The horsemen are defined, the Hebrew word, I forget what that word is, but by definition of that word, it means that the horsemen are kings, priests, and prophets. But the prophets, and in this case, the prophet is a pope, because in Revelations 19 and 20, it talks about the Antichrist and it talks about the false prophet. And in this definition, the kings, the priests, and prophets, it is symbolic, or it speaks to this new horseman or horsemen that are coming, and that is in this series that I'm trying to explain to you. All right, I'm going to stop right there, and we will come back and look at some more stuff in our next segment. Remember this, men and women of God, the worst is over, the best is yet to come. The worst is over, the best is yet to come. Even though I said all this stuff, and I know you said, oh my God, how is the worst over and the best yet to come when we start looking at end time prophecy and COVID-19? But your worst is, you know why? Because you are up under a different economy. So your worst is over, your best is yet to come. Your quality of life is getting better, and you're going to live, and you're not going to die, and you're going to declare the works of the Lord. Until next time, be blessed in Jesus' name.